This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. My guest today is Professor Henry Irwig, and he's in London at the moment, having just returned from Germany, but he actually lives in Boston. And our topic is the courage of the individual to stand up against injustice. Hello, Henry. How are you?
Hi, Sue. I'm good. And you?
I'm fine, thank you. We need to thank your brother, Les Irwig, in Australia. Les is a very cherished friend of mine, and he brought this remarkable story, which Henry will share with us, to my attention. And I met Henry, actually, it was 4 years ago, Henry. Can you believe it already? It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I know. No, time flies.
Henry, I would like to start about just talking a little bit about you and Dietmar and Rudy Zimek. The three of you brought this story about Arthur Samuel, your great-uncle, to the light. And I want you to tell us in a moment how that came about. But Henry was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and he moved to the United States and settled in Boston in 1980 with his wife and his two children. He is a professor in engineering. Is that right?
Yes, I was. I'm subsequently retired.
Retired, but you were at the MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and which is very impressive to us in South Africa. You're now retired, but you still are sought for advice, sometimes from your old pupils, which is also lovely. That's just a very short intro of you. But Dietmar Zimek was born in Geversdorf, and he spent his childhood in the banks of the Oster in Geversdorf and his youth on the edge of the Wingst Forest in Kundenberger. The story that we're about to hear focuses around Kundenberger. Then Dietmar's brother, Rudy, who unfortunately passed away early this year, he spent his youth in Kundenberg also, in the neighborhood of Arthur Samuel. Right. Tell us about this story, but first of all, how you came to meet. You say it was a coincidence. I say it's God's way of remaining anonymous.
I would say the same thing, actually. It's a strange story. I was working at my desk. It was probably about 2 years ago. Take a break from time to time, and often what I do is just take a look at the news. And so one of the news papers I look at is the BBC News on my computer. And I saw an article. There was an odd article about a situation that happened in a place called Kiel, which is in the Hamburg district of Germany. And somehow that reminded me of my great-uncle who I visited in 1964. So that's almost 60 years ago. I visited him for about 3 days. He was the only surviving sibling of 8. 6 of them and their families were murdered in the Nazi period. The other one was my grandmother, who emigrated to South Africa just before the Second World War. Anyhow, so I said, let me take a look. I looked at Google Map to see if I could see the little town where I visited him. I didn't remember the name and on the map, and I really didn't know where to look. I knew it was somewhere in the region of Hamburg, and I gave up. Anyhow, a little while later, I took another break. I thought, okay, let me put in his name. His name was Arthur Samuel. And of course, up popped, 100 Arthur Samuels all over the world. I said, well, this is getting a little bit stupid. Put it away. And then a little while later, I took another break, and I thought, okay, let me try one last time. And I put in his name, Arthur Samuel, and the word for like the king of the village fair, roughly translated, Schützenkönig. I put that in after his name. And what popped up was his wedding picture with his non-Jewish wife, the same picture that was in my in a family photograph album that my father had given to my brother Leslie and me. And I thought, this is incredible. 60 years or 58 years later, this picture should just appear. Anyhow, the picture was in an article from the Lower Saxony Broadcasting Corporation, and it was an English version of that article, and it referred to a video cast, which I could access quite easily. And in it, there was an interview with these two brothers, Rudy and Dietmar, by a journalist of the radio stations of the TV station called NDR, and her name is Christina von Suss. Anyhow, after a little to and fro, I found Rudy's email. I wrote to him, and not more than 12 hours later, he wrote back to me, and that's how we initially established contact.
Your contact actually was because the three of you were interested in Arthur Samuel, and the three of you knew Arthur Samuel. But you didn't realize that at the time when you made contact with them, did you?
Yes, I did, because the article and the picture related to the research that these two brothers were doing into Arthur Samuel. So they had established an interest a couple of years beforehand.
Okay, we'll get back to that.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. My guest today is Professor Henry Irwig, and we're discussing his story about his great-uncle, Arthur Samuel, how he survived in Nazi Holocaust era. So they had started their research a few years before that. Why did they start that?
They lived just around the corner from where Arthur and his wife Eugenie lived. They were, young boys at the time. They were playing soccer on the road, and he would pass by. I mean, at that time, he was in his 80s. He was at the same age, more or less, when I saw him. And he'd pass by with his dog on the way for a walk in the meadow, and they'd greet each other. And, that was the start of the relationship. But why were they interested in him? Their interest grew because they came across a little booklet that was published locally about various buildings in the small town, Kartenberger. And the booklet had a little bit of the history of some of the houses. It had a picture of the house before, or the building picture, and then it had a bit about their ownership. And the ownership of one of these buildings, which is now the pharmacy in Kartenberger, the history said that it was previously owned by Arthur Samuel. And they were surprised by this because they never knew about it. It also said he was Jewish. And that prompted them to start thinking about how a Jew could survive in that village during the Hitler period, and that's what prompted their research.
Okay,
and then I came by later. It was after they started on their initial research, and they invited me to join them.
So their interest was probably also piqued by the fact that they knew him as a nice old man walking his dog, and who used to greet them when they greeted him. Would you say that's probably part of this, that he was a nice man and they remembered him because of that?
Yeah, certainly. It was that and the fact that they didn't realize he was Jewish, and then the question of how did he survive. But it was interesting, just to divert a little bit. When I was in Kartenberg at the invitation of the mayor of the town and the the mayor of the district just recently, we stopped by Arthur's house, and the people in the house came out. These people had bought the house just after Arthur had died, and the woman in the house remembered Arthur because her mother was the helper of Arthur.
Good heavens!
And she said, she said the same thing. He's a very nice man. In fact, she said that often her mother, when she wanted to discuss, something in her life, would sit down with Arthur and speak to him about it. So that was a little bit more, of a kind of confirmation from another neighbor about his character.
And I actually saw you speaking in German. I was impressed, by the way, and speaking to her there, saying that it was your great uncle was Arthur. Right now, one of the reasons why I felt this was very necessary to have this program, and I know you agree with me, is because anti-Semitism is once again on the rise. Baseless hatred is appearing everywhere, whether it's anti-Semitic or Islamophobic. There's a lot of hatred at the moment in the world. And one of the things that you said when you gave a lecture to school children, which we will get to in a moment, but one of the things you said was, fight against condemnation, persecution, and anti-Semitism require personal commitment. It is important that good and courageous people are willing to help their fellow human beings. Now, what you said then is so important for today's world. Right now, in November 2023, you and the Zinmax brothers also felt that you wanted to spread the word, that each person had a responsibility. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yes, absolutely. As did the two mayors in Germany.
And I see that you say that the title of the website is In the Footsteps of Arthur and Eugenie Samuel, and that you had decided on this very quickly to make their memories alive, and that two of the authors we said were able to get to know Arthur Samuel personally as children, and you got to know him later. For those who have just tuned in, that's important just to remember that these three men were met online. If it wasn't for Google and Safari and what have you would not have met. But you did meet, and you formed a friendship over Zoom and internet, didn't you?
Absolutely. Well, we worked pretty hard together for initially for probably 3-4 months till Rudy, and we were going to put together a publication, and Rudy then came up with the idea of doing a website, and I said, okay, we'll do a website, and somehow it grew and grew and grew and grew. But certainly, and we worked on that for a good year. Mm-hmm. And so through that collaboration, which involved a lot of translation backwards and forwards,
I'm sure.
and give and take, by all three of us, actually more give than take by everyone. We became very close, and so that sort of certainly led to friendship.
I'm sure. Now, going back to your time right now, on the 85th anniversary of Kristallnacht, you were in Germany. Who met you at the airport?
Rudy, who passed away, he had passed away beginning of the year. His wife met me, and Dietmar met me. Now, both of whom I'd never met in person before.
And what did it feel like actually meeting them face to face?
It's like meeting old friends. Actually, more Dietmar, because although I'd seen Rudy's wife Sabina, I hadn't had too much interaction with her. But she and her husband were close, and so they shared a lot of the interaction on the making the website, and also she did a lot of the help editing the website, including my bad German.
So when you were together, were you speaking English or were you speaking German?
Mostly German. My German improved tremendously over 4 days. But when I got a little tired, I said, "Okay, now English," and we spoke English. They both could speak English, reasonably, probably even better than my German.
When you were in Germany, how did you get involved with going and speaking to schools and pupils about Arthur Samuels?
Yeah, for me, that's really the most interesting part. Rudy and Dietmar, especially Rudy, had been in close contact with, where he grew up, and with the mayor of the small town, and also the mayor of the larger district. And a number of occasions, they had extended an invitation to us to come to the town and do that. So they were interested in doing something especially related to the school children.
And it was about the Holocaust that they wanted you to speak.
Exactly about the subject that you mentioned earlier. How can you resist and fight prejudice and anti-Semitism? And I might add to that obviously it was quite an extensive program over the 4 days that they put together, and so that takes a little time and effort. And at one point, it was just going a little slow, and I wrote to Dietmar. I said, "Look, and this was after October the 7th. I said, if this is kind of a little bit awkward at this point, because I had no idea, then, we can do this some other time." And they'd spoken to both mayors, who said, "Absolutely not. This is absolutely the right time. We need this now." So
wow.
The opposite is true. We do not want to postpone this. We want to do it now. And as it turned out, one of the meetings with the public was actually on November the 9th, which was the 85th anniversary of Kristallnacht. And there was a lot of reference to that by folks who spoke.
Did you find that the students that you were talking to, did they know about the massacre of the 7th of October?
I'm sure they knew. It didn't come up directly in any of the questions that were asked. They're teenagers, sort of between 15 and say 17. So they're a little awkward and shy. But there wasn't direct reference to it during the talk. I'm sure they knew, because they in fact had preparation by the headmasters of the two schools ahead of the meeting.
So once you were talking to them, did you find that they were very interested? Did you get their attention?
The one school was a larger school, about same region, about 12 miles from Kardenberger. 140 students there in quite a big hall, and in fact, it was very impressive. They were rapt by the presentations that Dietmar and I made. There were introductions by the headmaster, introductions by others, and they were hugely attentive. And afterwards, the mayor of Kardenberger came up to me. He said, "Henry, that was fantastic. I don't know how we're going to beat this experience in the second school, which was a smaller school. The smaller school, they were also attentive, but fewer questions, maybe a bit more participation by the headmaster. So maybe they were a little bit more intimidated.
Okay. This is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program, and my guest today is Professor Henry Irwig, and we are talking about courage it takes to stand up against hatred. And Henry has just returned from Germany. He's in London at the moment. He resides in Boston.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
We're getting back to your time with the students there. In between your talks, how long when you did talk to them, how long were you given each time?
Each of us, Dietmar and I, were given, we took about 15 minutes each. And then I would say that the introductions and the conclusions were probably a total of maybe between 5 and 10 minutes each. And then the questions, certainly in the larger school, questions probably went on for a good 20 minutes.
And how did you feel about that? What did it do to you?
Well, in
retrospect, looking back.
Yeah, I don't quite know how to answer that. I mean, I guess in retrospect, it all feels a bit like a fairy tale. It just, the coincidences, the involvement of the mayor, of the two mayors, involvement of the pastor of this community, who was fantastic. In fact, let me tell you a bit about him, because Arthur and Eugenie's grave is in the Christian, he was the only Jew in town. His grave was in the Christian cemetery. Oh. There was the only cemetery there.
Right.
And after no one expressed any interest in the grave in Germany for 30 years, it can get deconsecrated. The church, under the direction of this pastor, passed a resolution that the stone should never be removed, should remain there forever.
And I saw a photo of it, and it's very well kept, that cemetery and the stone.
It is. And the pastor takes his congregation there every so often. In fact, he took them there on the day of Kristallnacht. He takes members of his congregation there for the explicit purpose of dangers of prejudice.
And so in between all of this, you met the pastor. Who else did you meet that you were able to interact with? Any other friends of Dietmar's or Rudy's?
I met a friend of his, but, they'd left the town many years back. So, but they certainly met Dietmar's elder sister, who also lived around the corner from Arthur, who remembered him. And then in an evening session, there must have been somewhere between 15 and 20 people there, like a little celebration. Again, Dietmar and I gave a talk there, and at that one, Sabine also joined us. And there were many questions there, and I had the chance to chat to quite a few people at that meeting. Probably of the 15 people there, probably certainly in question and answer spoke to 7 people, and then a few came by and asked us questions or made comments afterwards.
So it was really a very worthwhile visit. I would like to just pick up on your grandmother for a moment. Looking back to when you met your grandmother as a little boy, when you knew your grandmother, did she ever talk about the Holocaust?
She spoke about her life in Germany before. She certainly spoke about her one sibling who remained alive, Arthur. And she, it was a long time ago, so my recollection's not perfect. But I did know she had 7, she was one of 8 siblings. But I did not know what had happened to them in any kind of detail till I joined Dietmar and Rudy in this research. And as a result of that, I kind of did a bit of ancestry research, which I was never interested in before, and really established what had happened to most of those brothers and sisters of my grandmother Amelia and Arthur, and they were all murdered,
including their families
in Germany on the east. Most of their families, although there are a number of family members who, through just terrible circumstances, managed to survive, but not in Germany. They were in camps and they moved from one place to another, and eventually settled. Most of them settled in Australia in the end.
A lot of Holocaust survivors did go to Australia. And you spoke about your father, the album that you had got from your dad that he had done for you and Les. Just tell me, how did your father present those photos to you, the two of you? Did he speak about his family? Or?
I can't quite remember. We certainly didn't go through the album kind of page by page. If I can recall, he spoke about what was in them, and certainly, but Leslie and I have looked at it from time to time, and found things in it which have been useful. And I can give you an example. My father still has a cousin who was the youngest of all the cousins now. So this is my father's side. Arthur was on my mother's side.
Yes.
And he is a very well-known professor of physics here in the UK, in Oxford. And he was putting together a lecture for a Jewish organization in Oxford called the presentation "The Four Sisters," which were his mother and her three sisters, one of which was my grandmother.
Okay.
And as he was putting that together, I helped him just a very, very little bit, but I found a picture of his mother and his father's wedding, which he had never had.
Gosh, is that so?
And so now he has that, and I have the copy in the album. So it's been, it's had some usefulness besides just sitting in our bookshelves.
But it sounds quite amazing that you also went online, which there was never that opportunity, our generation growing up. But for the younger generation, I know that one of the things you said to them when you gave them a talk was use the opportunities you can get online to find out more about our world and what came before. It's important, isn't it, to know what came before in order to not make the same mistakes going forward, which we already are making, if you think.
We are. And, what I kind of underlined in the talk as well is that, you need to be a little persistent. You can't just go to a webpage and say, oh, that's interesting, go away. If there's something that's of interest to you, you might want to dig a little further, because that's really how you get to learn and also, maybe find the truth, because there's so much untruths on the web. So it requires some persistence and some analysis.
So true. I looked up my grandfather. I hadn't heard much about him at all from my father. And I decided, just also on the off chance that I'd look him up, it took me to his site. He was killed in Burma in the Second World War. And it actually took me to his grave. And which was, no one had ever seen. I sent it on to my nephews and nieces and our family, because it was quite amazing. I could not believe that Google would suddenly pop up with my grandfather's gravestone. So we actually, in this time, we do have so much opportunity to look up history.
It is amazing. And there's also a time dimension here. If I'd gone to the web 1 year before I actually did, there wouldn't have been anything there.
Good heavens. That's the coincidence you talk about.
Yeah, it's coincidence. Also kind of underlines that, if there's something that takes your interest, you can't just leave it and hope that you can come back to it later because it may not be there.
Absolutely. And when you left Germany, what did it feel like saying goodbye to Dietmar, especially?
Well, we've been working hard after that, so it didn't feel very, very different. There's an article that was published. There's been other contacts. Subsequently, we just got a wonderful letter from the mayor of the district thanking us for coming and commenting on what the headmasters told him just the day before yesterday when he met them about our sessions. And so, although we'll not be working as hard, the contact will carry on, hopefully.
And the magazine, I actually saw the one article, which was on Saturday, November the 11th, it came out. And it said, magazine at the weekend, how Arthur Samuel survived the Nazi era. You have your own opinion on how he survived. What do you think attributed to his survival?
That was the purpose of our search. It's clear that there were a number of reasons. One was he was very integrated into the town. He was strongly a member of the town. Two, he always looked to the future, and he had an outlook which I think was based on his liberal Jewish upbringing. Clearly, the people in the town played a very big role as well. His wife was non-Jewish, and from what I can gather, speaking to other sources such as the Wiener Library, the Holocaust Library here in London, that wouldn't have protected him, at least near the end of the war.
No, it wouldn't. We'll get back to that in a moment.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. My guest today is Professor Henry Irwig, and we're discussing his story about his great-uncle, Arthur Samuel, how he survived in the Nazi Holocaust era, and the people that Henry met who were working with him, Dietmar and Rudi Zinmek, and it's a wonderful story of how Arthur actually survived as a Jew in this time. And we especially are wanting to talk about this now as the anti-Semitism is on the rise again. Henry, right, so we were talking about what you thought attributed to Arthur's survival. So can we get back to that again? You were saying he was married to a Gentile woman, Eugenie.
That was a factor, but from my conversations with others, including people at the Wiener Holocaust Library here in London, that was never a reason not to persecute Jews, especially towards the end of the period, just approaching the end of the Second World War, 1944 and 45. And then survival as well. The war ended in 1945. If it had gone until 1946, things may have changed. We don't know. But it's sort of all of those things together in a mix.
And you also said when you gave your talk that there are two basic issues which you wanted to draw students' attention to. Do you remember what those were? The empathy?
Yes, yeah, sure. And the students seem to relate to that quite well. The one was the need for an importance of empathy and generosity, towards
the other.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that characterized Arthur and the community at the time he lived there. And I think it also characterized the joint work that Rudy and Dietmar and I did together. The other one was inquisitiveness and initiative, and we spoke a little bit about that side of things a little while back when we spoke about the internet and the need to. There's something that interests you, that you need to pursue it and then take it as far as you want to go.
Absolutely. And for anyone who actually wants to read this story, because that's what your project ended up in, almost a book form, it's particularly interesting. And you can go onto the homepage, arthur.samuel, a small s, .de, and you'll find the story there. If you're German speaking, obviously it will be in German, but you can go on to Google Translate, and it will come up as English if you want it in English or any other language.
It does translate quite well, but just a slight correction. It's Arthur dash.
Oh, it's a dash.
Samuel. No, yeah, it's a dash Samuel.de.
GE, okay. And it's really very worth reading the story. It's very interesting. Now, Arthur's also moved to Lower Saxony. And plus, the other thing that he did do was he was known as an incredibly good shot.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't... they had these kind of village organizations centered around shooting, because in that area in particular, there are a lot of ducks, geese, all kinds of things. They now have wolves there, so I don't know that he was ever a good shot. I think it was more the position that he had as king of the riflemen, if you want to call it that. It's more a matter of being part of the town rather than being a good shot. But it was unusual Jews to be king of rifles,
anything.
or whatever you call them.
King of anything. But you say that Arthur's empathy and his fair treatment of local farmers, as well as his generosity in supporting the young people of Kandenberger, also could have played a part in people reaching out to him when he was stripped of all he was a cattle trader, and all of that was stripped from him. But the local people did support him, didn't they? Covertly, obviously, but he was supported in ways.
That's the only way he survived, is because they supported him. They smuggled food to him. I mean, make no mistake, he was persecuted. His business was taken away from him. His house was taken away from him. He had to work many years as a road worker. He was in Preston to service. His wife had to work in the fish factory in Cuxhaven nearby to make ends meet. And then eventually he had to work in the sawmill in the forest. So now he had a very rough time. But in any event, the only reason that was possible for him to survive there was through the help of not only one person, the help of many people. And it seems like from what I learned, it seems like that help couldn't have come without any knowledge of the Nazi party. In fact, the mayor of that town at the time was Nazi. So the Nazis knew that he was there. And because of the people and his stature in the town, chose to kind of let it be as opposed to do anything. They did arrest him. They arrested him on Kristallnacht, in fact.
Oh, did they?
And he spent quite a few weeks in the prison. How he was let out, and we don't know. In fact, quite a few Jews who went into concentration camps were let out, and then they went back in.
That's very interesting, because one of the things which I've said so often lately, that whenever I have interviewed or met Holocaust survivors, one of their greatest emotional pains have been the bystanders who did nothing. They could have been their neighbors, could have been someone they'd worked with, and they stood by and did nothing while the Jews were sent off to cattle cars to the concentration camps. And that has often been their greatest hurt. And they've said that they expected bad treatment from the Nazis and the Poles in the concentration camps, but they didn't expect the people that they knew, the bystanders, to turn on them and to keep silent as they did. So your story highlights a very different perspective on what people can do if they are prepared to stand up and make a difference. And it takes huge courage to do so.
Absolutely.
What is your next project?
I'm still trying to get over this one. Sue, I don't have an answer for that.
Well, I would like you, especially in this time of darkness descending on the world, to actually think very carefully about bringing this story a bit more to people, letting more people read about it, perhaps in America, in the UK where you are right now. Certainly this will go out in South Africa and to all our listeners. And I hope that you sorry to interrupt, we have indeed spoken about two things. One is getting doing the webpage in English, and two, also doing a book from the web page. That's already been prepared, but we've got a way to go before we find a way that we can kind of distribute that. Well done. I'm being told to wrap up. And you told me yesterday to only have you on air for 5 minutes. Well, we've been together for a lot longer than that. Thank you so much, Henry, for being with me, for sharing this story. And is there anything you would like to end by saying?
No, thank you for having me. I don't think I thanked you yet. I gave you all kinds of grief about 15 minutes and so on.
5 minutes, never mind.
And so thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing from folks and continuing this. So very much appreciate it, Sue, and all the best.
Thank you so much, Henry. God bless and enjoy your stay in London.
Okay, thank you, and thanks to your assistant too. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Vusi. Thanks. Bye.